Arguing feels powerful. It gives the illusion of control, of being right, of defeating the other. In a world addicted to opinions, debate is currency. But Friedrich Nietzsche saw something different. For him, arguing wasn't a sign of strength, it was a symptom of weakness. Why? Because the need to argue often comes from insecurity, not conviction. From the fear of being wrong, not the courage of truth. Strong minds, Nietzsche believed, don't waste time trying to convert others. They live their philosophy, rather than shouting it across the room. He wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." That why is internal. It doesn't need validation. And when you truly know what you believe, you stop trying to win others over. You start embodying your beliefs in silence. Think about it. When you're truly at peace with your perspective, do you argue? Or do you observe? Do you need to dominate a conversation? Or are you okay letting others speak? Nietzsche wasn't advocating for silence out of passivity. He was pointing to something deeper. The strength to resist the ego's need to be right. And this is where the paradox lies. The more desperate you are to prove your truth, the more likely it is you haven't fully faced it yourself. Arguing becomes a mask, a distraction, a battlefield where no one wins, and everyone walks away more entrenched in their own beliefs. Nietzsche believed that truth doesn't need defense. It needs clarity. It needs action. It needs embodiment. So next time you feel the urge to argue, ask, what am I defending? And what am I afraid to let go of? For Nietzsche, strength wasn't measured by dominance over others. It was measured by mastery of the self. Not how loudly you speak, but how well you listen. Not how forcefully you argue, but how quietly you understand. Not how many you can control, but how deeply you can restrain your own reflex to control. This is the heart of his idea of the will to power. Not the hunger to conquer the world, but the courage to face what lives inside you. Real power, to Nietzsche, was inward. It was the power to choose stillness in the face of noise. The power to stay present when every impulse begs you to react. The power to let someone misunderstand you and not feel the need to correct them. That's strength, not applause, not dominance, not being right on the internet, but the inner gravity to remain rooted while everything around you pulls you toward performance. And yet, most people spend their lives reacting, flaring up in comments, defending their truths, turning every disagreement into a battlefield of egos. Why? Because arguments feel like action. Because being right feels like winning. Because silence feels like surrender. When in fact, it's often the most powerful answer of all. Nietzsche saw this clearly. He believed that people argue most when they are unsure, when the belief they defend isn't stable enough to stand on its own. So they shout, not to convince you, but to reassure themselves. Because if enough people agree, maybe the doubt inside will go quiet. But here's the truth Nietzsche was pointing to. Conviction, when left unchecked, becomes a trap. You stop questioning. You stop growing. You start defending ideas, not because they're true, but because they've become part of who you are. And when your identity is fused with your opinions, any challenge feels like an attack. Not on your ideas, on you. That's why Nietzsche warned us. Convictions are more dangerous enemies of truth than lies. Because a lie at least can be challenged, but a conviction, when clung to blindly, becomes sacred. And sacred things don't get questioned. They get defended. So what do? You pause. You observe the urge to react, You ask, am I trying to understand or trying to win? You notice when your ego is speaking louder than your reason, and you practice something few people ever do. You let the argument pass, not because you're weak, but because you know the truth doesn't need defending with volume. It just needs to be lived. That's Nietzsche's strength, not the warrior who fights every battle, but the philosopher who learns which battles aren't worth fighting. Have you noticed how often debates turn into something else? Not dialogue, not curiosity, but warfare. We dress it up in language, discussion, disagreement, debate. But beneath the surface, most arguments are ego in costume. It's not about truth. It's about dominance. It's not about learning. It's about not feeling small. We weaponize facts to defend the fragile scaffolding of our identity. We interrupt, not to clarify, but to reassert control. And when we lose, it doesn't just sting. It threatens the version of ourselves we've built around being right. Nietzsche saw this clearly. He believed that many arguments weren't rooted in philosophy, but psychology. They weren't about the idea, but the insecurity beneath it. He noticed that we often speak not to express, but to impress. That our so-called pursuit of truth can quickly become theater. A performance of strength, certainty, and intellectual superiority. But true strength, Nietzsche believed, isn't found in noise. It's found in presence. In the calm person who listens more than they speak. In the one who doesn't need to dominate a room to know their worth. In the individual who can hold space for disagreement without becoming defensive. This is why Nietzsche valued solitude so highly. Because only in solitude are you free from the temptation to perform. There's no crowd to please, no enemy to defeat. Only you, and your unspoken doubts. And this is where the real argument happens. Not the one where you try to dismantle someone else's point, but the one where you interrogate your own. Can you sit with a thought that threatens your worldview? Can you watch your certainty crumble and not rush to rebuild it with something safer? Can you resist the need to have the last word? Most people can't, because most people have mistaken being right for being worthy. They've fused opinion with identity, and when a belief is challenged, it feels like they are being erased. But strength, the kind Nietzsche respected, is different. It's the strength to pause, to reflect, to stay still in the face of discomfort, without flinching. Because when you step back from the battlefield of opinion, something quieter begins to rise. Clarity. You start to see how often you've argued just to hear yourself speak. You notice how many hills you are willing to die on, simply because your pride refused to walk down. And eventually, you stop wasting your breath trying to be understood by everyone. You start saving that energy for something more sacred, understanding yourself. Nietzsche once wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." But here's the question he left hanging in the silence. Are your arguments rooted in your why? Or are they just clever distractions from the fact that you don't know it yet? The need to win arguments often comes from fear, not strength. Fear of being wrong, fear of being seen, fear of the unknown space that opens up when certainty collapses. So instead of sitting with discomfort, we rush to defend, to assert, to correct, to prove. Not because we're sure, but because we're unsure. Not because we're grounded, but because we're grasping. Nietzsche saw this need clearly, not as a sign of intelligence, but of insecurity. He didn't dismiss the act of arguing outright, but he questioned the impulse behind it. Because most of the time, We don't argue for the truth. We argue to protect our image. We confuse winning with wisdom. And in doing so, we miss the deeper opportunity: growth. Nietzsche invited us to a higher standard, not of cleverness, but of sovereignty. He spoke of the sovereign individual, someone who governs themselves, whose strength is inward, not performative, who doesn't need the last word, because they've already made peace with their own. This is real power: to remain still when provoked, to remain kind when challenged, to remain clear when chaos surrounds you. It's not submission, it's freedom. Think about it. True freedom isn't found in changing someone's mind. It's found in no longer needing to. When you let go of the need to win, you make space for something far more valuable: presence. Because arguing often becomes a form of escape. We use it to distract ourselves from doubt, from vulnerability, from the discomfort of being misunderstood. But when you build enough inner strength, that discomfort stops scaring you. You begin to notice that silence has more power than shouting ever did. That walking away doesn't mean you're retreating. It means you're choosing peace over performance. Nietzsche believed that true mastery is self-mastery. That the strongest person is not the one who speaks the most, but the one who doesn't need to speak just to feel seen. So how do you start moving in that direction? First, by treating the urge to argue as a signal, not a command. Just because a part of you flares up doesn't mean it must take the wheel. Second, by pausing to ask, why do I need to win this? Is it about truth, or is it about pride? And finally, by remembering that real peace rarely comes from being right. It comes from letting go of ego, of noise, of the illusion that your value depends on your victory. This doesn't mean silence is always the answer. There are moments where your voice is needed. But when you do speak, let it be from clarity, not from fear. From compassion, not from conquest. Nietzsche once said, "The higher we soar, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly." And maybe that's the cost of growth. You will be misunderstood, misread, even dismissed. But that's not your burden to carry. Your role is not to defeat every voice that disagrees. It's to embody a strength so rooted, so unshakable, that it no longer needs to be explained. In a world addicted to debate, presence becomes a kind of rebellion. And your greatest power might just be the one that says nothing and listens instead. You've likely been in conversations where someone's words felt like weapons, where logic was twisted, not to explore truth, but to dominate, where every sentence wasn't a bridge, but a battleground, where pauses weren't moments of thought, but tactical silences waiting to strike. That's not communication. That's combat dressed in rhetoric. And Nietzsche would have seen it for what it is: the theater of the insecure, a place where ego wears the mask of intellect and dialogue becomes performance. Because the truly strong, the truly wise, don't need to overpower. They don't speak to win. They speak to understand. When your worth is not tied to being right, you stop arguing to protect yourself. You start listening to connect. So instead of sharpening your tongue, sharpen your presence. Instead of stockpiling counter-arguments, try attuning to what isn't being said. You'll find that most people don't actually want to debate. They want to be seen, heard, understood. They want permission to be human, and the one who can offer that, not as a manipulation, but as a mirror, holds a quiet kind of power, the kind that doesn't flare. It grounds. This isn't weakness. It's restraint. It's the refusal to be baited into battles that cost more than they're worth. Nietzsche believed silence isn't the absence of thought, it's its refinement. He said, "He who cannot put his thoughts on ice should not enter into the heat of dispute." Meaning, if you can't cool your fire, don't bring it into someone else's storm. Because when you argue from reactivity, you burn the very bridge you're trying to build. But when you respond from presence, your words land with weight, not force. So the next time you feel that inner heat rising, pause. Ask yourself, do I want to express or impress? Do I want clarity or control? Do I want truth or just a temporary ego win? One path leads to connection, the other to more noise. The more conscious you become, the less you have to react. The more secure you are in yourself, the less you need others to validate your stance. This is the paradox of power. The more you grasp at it, the less you have. But the more you embody it without needing it, the more it emanates from you naturally. You stop needing the last word. You stop chasing intellectual trophies. You start showing up with something far rarer, presence. And in a world addicted to argument, that presence is magnetic, not because it dominates, but because it disarms. Nietzsche's strongest man isn't the one who shouts the loudest. It's the one who listens the deepest, who knows when to speak and when not to. So next time you enter a conversation that feels like a battlefield, remember, you don't have to pick up every sword handed to you. Sometimes the most powerful act is not to fight, but to witness, to pause, to hold the space with grace. Because eventually, you'll learn. The highest form of strength isn't in defeating others. It's in mastering the part of you that needs to. They say arguing is about ideas. But Nietzsche knew better. He saw it for what it really was, an act of insecurity, dressed up as logic. When we argue to win, we reveal what we lack. When we argue to be right, we reveal how little we understand. Because real strength doesn't argue. It doesn't need to. It observes. The truth is, most arguments don't come from the desire to understand. They come from fear. Fear of being wrong. Fear of losing control. Fear of being exposed. But what if you stopped engaging in battles that only drain your energy? What if, instead of reacting, you asked, why does this trigger me? Why do I need to prove myself to someone else? That question doesn't just lead to peace. It leads to power. Because choosing not to argue isn't weakness. It's discipline. It's the wisdom to know that silence speaks louder than rage. And detachment is more dangerous than dominance. Nietzsche didn't suggest passivity. He suggested precision. He believed the strongest man is not the one who attacks, but the one who doesn't need to. So the next time you feel the pull to prove yourself, don't ask, what can I say to win? Ask, what part of me is afraid to lose? And maybe, just maybe, the root of that fear isn't found in a person you're debating with. Maybe it's in the part of you you've never dared to face. A part you buried long ago. A part that whispers behind every defensive reaction. A part that Carl Jung called the shadow. Because the man who constantly argues is often a man hiding from himself. And until you face the shadow, it will speak for you. Through every fight, every projection, every false victory. So ask yourself, are you truly in control of your voice? Or is your shadow still speaking for you?